Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Mark Stouse, and we're going to be talking about AI in companies, whether we should be using it, how we should be using it. We're going to see where the conversation goes. Mark, where can people find you?
LinkedIn. I'm kind of wall to wall, right? I'm very active. I'm very easily found. And if you want to chat, I'm very easy to do that as well. So,
And I found you on LinkedIn.
that's right. You did indeed.
So, open question. How should B2B businesses respond to artificial intelligence?
I think that maybe the most important thing that I can say in response to that question is that AI, which is all four types of AI, not just Gen AI. So the other three are analytical AI, causal AI, and autonomous. At different rates and all that kind of stuff over the next several years, they're all going to be bringing a level of transparency and accountability to business that, quite honestly, none of us are really prepared for. All of us have sort of operated within what might be called a zone of ambiguity for most of our careers, right? This is a zone where my opinion is just as good as your opinion, and we can kind of bob and weave and do all that kind of stuff. AI is shrinking that zone tremendously over the next several years. And pretty much, I would say by mid 2027 at the latest, most of what really matters in business will either be known or be knowable, right? And that also includes, like, do you know what the hell you're talking about, right? And so you kind of have to look at AI in lots of different ways, right? But a really huge one, a cornerstone aspect of AI, is that it is a bullshit detector of monumental proportions, right? And so I think that's really it. I think that's and when you combine that with, lots of new rulings in different jurisdictions about fiduciary duty and the expansion of fiduciary duty to the officer level of companies, not just the board and directors. I mean, personal accountability for officers in terms of, did they do what they needed to do in order to mitigate risks, increase volatility in the marketplace, which means everybody's sense of risk goes up. And so what are a lot of shareholders more likely to do during periods of great volatility? Well, we have a lot of history on this. They sue. The incidence of legal action by shareholders during periods like the one we're in right now is many orders of magnitude greater than perceived stable times.
So one of the perceived wisdoms that we see on LinkedIn is that AI is, all we need to do is basically automate everything. The argument about content and content marketing seems to have been won. So what we're going to do is we're going to use AI to create a whole load of content, and then we're going to automate everything. How do you see that playing out?
Well, I think that if nothing else was changing, I think it'd still be bad. Okay. It's incredibly dilutive, very inflationary in terms of its impact on content. The findability and utility of any one piece of content goes way down. But also, what's really happening here with AI is what historians call a super technology. And that means that it plays both sides of the field, So the so-called defensive use of AI on the buyer side to shift the balance of power in the buying cycle is immense, and we're already seeing it. AI powered buyer bots that find, every piece, everything you've ever written or said about your product or service, triangulate that against known facts and decide whether you're credible or not, and then offer you up or not as a vendor that should be considered. The fact that there's AI powered filter systems. I just saw one demoed a couple of weeks ago called the Interceptor, that is sold to enterprise IT organizations, and it's installed on email servers, and it filters out all marketing email. These are all happening. This is real, right? This is not science fiction. So what does that mean? That means that rapidly the things that will matter most in terms of go to market will be the provisioning of very high quality, high trust information, because that's going to be the gating factor right there. I mean, your website, for example, ultimately may take a couple of years or so to fully evolve, but it's going to be an LLM with a URL on the front of it, right? And it's going to be optimized mainly for bots, not people. A lot of aspects of B2B marketing that have been, like stock and trade kind of things for, a couple decades minimum, are just not going to exist to any significant degree. So it's not going to be about a loss of jobs as much as it's going to be about a whole sub-discipline just going away, right? So what you're seeing right now is an enormous amount of technical debt, organizational debt, logical debt, right? In go-to-market, this is not limited to marketing. This is as bad, maybe even worse in sales organizations. And so a lot of these CEOs and CFOs that I have interviewed from my book have said, you know what, over the next several years, we're just going to kind of scrape it off, and we're going to redevelop the whole thing with new leadership logic, right? I mean, build it for the future, not the idea that you can graft AI onto the existing technical, logical, and organizational debt is not. And by the way, it's not true. It's not going to work, and it's not limited to any one function. We're not picking on marketing here.
No,
marketing is just a kind of an obvious, target, a meme, if you will, in some ways. But sales just as much, HR just as much. The impact that we're going to see, for example, on what AI means for the definition of leadership, it's going to be significant, because what you're going to have is the human leader is no longer going to do performance evaluation. That's going to be something that happens almost entirely, not all of it, but vast majority of it is going to happen by AI, right? So what does that mean for the leader? The leader becomes a source of probably what leaders should be anyway, which is I'm making it possible for my team to do excellent things, right? To go above and beyond. I'm there as a resource to them. In a sense, I work for them, right? My greatest goal is their success. And in making sure that they're successful, I am successful, right? That kind of thing is going to be where it's leadership's going to be redefined in certain circles where it's had a bad definition for a long time.
I certainly, one of the things that when I came across you, I read one of your articles, and it was one of the first articles I've read where where someone was talking about the opposite side of marketing, because a lot of people say, well, what we're going to do is we're just going to generate more and more content, and what you were saying was that there was these bots that were actually going to actually be far more clever at stopping. And I think you said something like personalization or targeting as it's known today would become obsolete.
Yes, I think there's a lot of evidence to support that personalization will continue to happen, but it will be done from the buyer side. In other words, the buyer bots will take all the information that you are broadcasting, essentially always on demand, however you want to phrase it. And that's going to be localized, personalized, and customized for a particular situation. And that way they get the benefits of personalization, but they don't have to give up any of their data that enables the seller to do it for them. And so I think that's a major change, right? I mean, and I think that, parenthetically, I'm just going to say this. Marketing and sales in particular did so much of this to themselves, right? I mean, Exhibit A on this is the preamble to the GDPR legislation almost a decade ago, right? Where it explicitly said, the marketing profession is what brought this old, moribund set of regulations that hadn't been touched by the EU in like 40 years. And the bad behavior of marketers in terms of marketing automation, all this kind of stuff, and the misuse of data brought it back into being, right? I mean, it's like if that's your big contribution, that's something to really think about.
Yeah, I think that I think people quite often misunderstand something with GDPR is that actually they think it's new, where actually it's not.
That's right. Yeah, it actually started in the 1950s.
Yeah. So you also talked in your article about buyer bots evaluating and disqualifying vendors silently. Forrester recently said that 80% of buyers are using LLMs as part of their the buying process. Whether it's 80% or 30%, it doesn't really matter. It just shows that people are using it.
Yep.
And I think it must be terrifying for people to think that the old ways of having to go to a website and then you could check to see that someone's been there or sending someone an email, and the fact that they're able to use these bots, evaluate things, and then, as you said, disqualify people silently. You never knew that you were never picked for the shortlist.
That's right. And this is not speculation on my part. This is not science fiction. I've seen these products demoed, right? Either in alpha or beta, or in one case, it's out in the wild, right? I mean, this is powerful stuff. I mean, there's degrees of stealth and all that kind of stuff, right? But I mean, they're generally pretty stealthy. So the number of buying signals they're going to be out there in the market are going to start falling like a rock. The best one that I've personally experienced, right? The buyer goes into the bot management system, and all the bot allows it to do initially is to specify the problem. No, nothing else. Can't say how they want to solve for it or anything like that. The bot goes out and makes a general assessment of the marketplace. Is this a software solution to the problem? Is it a services solution to the problem? Is it something else? Right. And then they start looking at different vendors in each one of these areas, and they make some value judgments, and then they report back up, right? And they say that, this is what we found. And oh, by the way, we're going to also give you some parameters on what you should be paying for these services or software, licenses or whatever, right? So basically, you've got at the very end of the buying motion, you've got a couple of human to human conversations, probably not lasting longer than a couple hours. At which point the buyer says, hey, really like your solution, would love to work with you. This is what we're prepared to pay you for it. Do you know that you would prefer to negotiate something, but that's not on the table? Would you like the business? Would you not like the business? It gets it super stripped down, right? And that means that if marketers are worried about this, okay, and I'm not saying they shouldn't be, from a personal self-interest perspective, they don't have anything to worry about in comparison to sales guys, right? I mean, this is going to just decimate the need for salespeople, except the very, very, very best.
So we've had a question which I want to bring up from Gerald Marshall. For marketers looking to enhance their skills, what do you think is the first aspect of AI they should master? Great question.
I think that the most important part, so you kind of have to break this up, right? So if we're talking about Gen AI, which is prompt based, right? I think you have to have the logic, and you have to understand Socratic thought, which is essentially question-oriented exchanges, right? Because that's how you're going to most effectively mine something like ChatGPT or whatever, right? I think that when you go beyond that into, because that's a Gen AI is a knowledge AI. It's effectively commoditizing all of the onboard knowledge in your brain. Full stop. So then what does this really say past a certain point of maturity, right? It really means that the whole 9 yards going forward is about your ability to make the right decisions. And now we're getting into analytical AI, causal AI, and autonomous, right? And autonomous is sort of separate and apart anyway, because it's more like making all the decisions for you in certain areas, right? So agentic AI is a 1B, right, on autonomous, right? It's like super targeted, very basic. They use the word low grade, not in a derogatory way. It's just a very simplistic kind of thing, right? But we're talking about really here analytical and causal AI, which are not prompt based, right? This is model based. This is algorithm based. This is all about what happened and why did it happen and will it happen again? This is about causal forecasting. This is about, in a highly probabilistic, making better and better and better bets kind of way, right? This is about knowing the future more transparently than we currently do. This is about understanding the network effects. Go-to-market is an ultimate illustration of a network effect. So a network effect means if you just measure all of the pieces in the network, and you put that up on a dashboard, the best you've done is to have a historical understanding of what was going on in that network point to point on a given day. You have no idea of the actual relationships and what's making it all move and how it continues to move and what it's going to look like, next month, next year. You don't have anything, right? So this is where those kinds of analytics, causal analytics in particular, really comes into play. And so I think that it's a change in the way that you know how to think is the most important thing I could say. It's also about playing by a new set of rules. I mean, fiduciary duty to your shareholder in a business context is going to sort of be like 90% of the game, right? So it's a level of responsibility on to the upside, what's good for the shareholder, good for the company, and mitigation of the downside, things that are bad for the shareholder and bad for the company, right? And you're going to have to do that across an expanse of time. It's not yesterday and today. I've got to think short term. I've got to think long term, longer term, right? I've got to balance all those interests. I can't do that. The unaided human brain is great for a lot of things. That's not one of them. And so you're going to need this AI to essentially, I'm being a little hyperbolic here, okay, but make you a bionic decision maker.
Mark, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. The 20 minutes goes so fast. Fascinating discussion. Thank you so much for that. Remind people where they can get hold of you.
LinkedIn. My handle is at Mark Stouse, and I'm very responsive. It's the number one way that I have a presence in the market, so I'm there all the time.
Mark, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.